All right, good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, May 15th. It is 6:03 p.m., and I am calling the Policy Committee meeting to order. Tonight, we'll do roll call. Heather Raymond, I'm here. Dottie Oden. Dottie, say present.
I'm here.
Okay. Bill Mosier.
I'm here.
Okay. Sue Porter.
Here.
Okay, and we also have Donna Fitzpatrick. It should be noted that Mr. Mosier is attending via phone due to his health. All right, so I packed a lot into this meeting this evening, but I'm hoping that it will go quickly. So the first few that we have, 1124, 1126, and 1127 are all updates from the numbered system to the letter system, and changing the wording from committee on to the name of the committee and then the word committee. So for all three of these, those are the only changes, and it's simply to bring them in line with all of our other committee policies. Does anyone have any questions about that? No? Okay. Then I think I'm looking for a motion. I wonder if we can have a motion to accept the changes of all three at once instead of having three separate motions. Okay.
I will make a motion to approve the changes of policy 1124, 1126, and 1127.
Okay. And we'll do roll. Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a yes. Mrs. Oden?
Yes.
Great. Oh, yes, we do need to resend them. Let's go ahead and have a motion to rescind the numbers so that it triggers us to remember for the main board meeting that we have to have that vote at the main board.
I will
Okay, so moved.
Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Mosier. I'll second. So roll call. Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Mrs. Oden?
Yes.
Okay. So change. I'm just going to make a note to myself so I remember. I can spell rescind properly. Okay. The next item on the agenda is policy IHCD. Mrs. Hohensee is not here today. However, she brought to the attention of the committee that the state has changed a law that basically the state is allowing some monies to go to community colleges for dual enrollment students. And in order for the community colleges to be able to access that money, there's specific language that was required by law. I'm just trying to see if I can find the law in case anybody had any questions about that.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
And just to add that in order for Nashua to qualify to work with the community colleges with these funds, this has to be done by July 1st at the latest, which is why we really want to get it done this policy meeting so we can get it to the full board the next meeting.
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Fitzpatrick.
You're welcome.
The law is SB 101. And so basically what we did is I got the information for this language. I took it directly from the New Hampshire School Board Association. Some of our sister districts have already done this. Wyndham has done it. Hudson has done it. And the language is identical in every other school district that I looked at, because I imagine it comes directly from what the law is requiring. Does anyone have any questions or discussion regarding the language changes here on IHCD? No? Okay. Then I would be looking for a motion to accept the changes as indicated in this policy.
So moved. Accepted as written.
Thank you, Mr. Mosier. I will second that. Okay, roll call. Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mrs. Oden?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Great. perhaps this isn't as ambitious of a schedule as possible as I expected. All right, so the next item on our agenda is policy BEDB. This is our agenda preparation and dissemination policy. In the past, we had language that had required 7 days notice to get items on the agenda. So for board members or anyone else to put new business on the agenda for our regular board meetings, they had to be submitted 7 days prior. And then last year, in 2016, it was changed to the Thursday before the meeting at 9 a.m. Having had some conversations with our wonderful support staff over at the superintendent's office, it is incredibly challenging for them to get new items, make all those copies, and disseminate everything by midday on Friday. It's simply a Herculean administrative task. So they've asked for a little bit of relief. We had initially proposed making it 5 business days prior, but having talked to Tara earlier this week, she suggested by Tuesday, end of business, which is 4:30, would be sufficient for her. I don't have a very strong feeling on this, one way or the other. The other new item on this policy would be to change the word concurrence in the 4th paragraph to a majority vote, just to make it clear that concurrence means a majority vote. Was there any discussion about this? Mrs. Oden.
I have a concern about the 5th paragraph. The board shall follow the order of business set up by the agenda unless the order is altered by a 2/3 majority vote of the members present. I can think back to assigning committees. I had to move new business up to unfinished business, and I had to deal with that. So I think a simple majority would fit that much better than a 2/3, because there are times, and from talking to Attorney Bolton, you know, he said as president, he said you have to work on the agenda the way you need to get things accomplished. So I think a majority of the board, if that is more agreeable than 2/3 to people, I would appreciate that, having been in the position to having to change the agenda.
Okay, Mr. Mosier?
Yes. Go ahead.
Did you have any thoughts about striking 2/3 in the 5th paragraph and making the ability to alter the order of the agenda simply a majority vote?
I think that, yes, I think excuse me.
That's fine. Would you like a minute? I can talk instead.
Yeah, I think it should be a majority vote.
Okay, great. I also agree. I think in the 6 months I've been here, it feels like we have to do a lot of shifting to accommodate the public and to accommodate issues that arise during the meeting, so I don't have a problem with that.
I'd just like to say a lot of it has to do with the time, seeing where we have set a time limit. So I think it's important to make sure we get business done that needs to be done that might be further down on the agenda than it should be to get it passed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. And one question that I did have that I was hoping Mr. Mosier or you, Mrs. Oden, could answer for me with your experience is the next paragraph, paragraph 6, says the board may not revise board policies or adopt new ones unless there is an emergency. To me, I feel like we do that all the time in the policy committee meetings, so I'm wondering, does that mean at a regular board meeting, or is that like in general?
Mr.
Well,
Mosher?
It seems kind of vague.
It does. I'm wondering if we ought to alter that language as, you know, to something to say that the policy committee is where that work is done. Mrs. Oden.
I look back and it, board approved in 2016, again in 2016. I think what I would do is go back and look at the policy as it was in 2007, before the 16 changes were made, and to see if that's a new issue in this policy. I think that seems like it should be just in policy, so I'm not sure about that, but I would go back and look.
Yeah, and in the central office, in Tara's office, she'll have the previous policies, so we would be able to look at that, but we'd have to table this until we could do that.
Yes, I got a different thought on that.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Mosier.
At the board, well, I'll read it first. The board shall not revise board policies or adopt new ones unless there is an emergency. And I'd like to know what constitutes an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems kind of vague when I say the board shall not revise board policies or adopt new ones. Now, the board may revise a policy if there is an emergency, but they have to define what the emergency may be. We can't just say an emergency. We could say that the sun came up yesterday, and that's an emergency. Or Johnny got caught going over the fence, and that was an emergency. So we have to define what the emergency is first. What the emergency is, and then we can say, well, okay. Then by a consensus of the available board that may revise the policy. But you have to have a majority of the board before you can do any changes. And if there's an emergency, you have to call an emergency meeting in order to get the consensus of the board, and they give the board a chance to digest what they want to do, because you just can't label anything an emergency, call in a few people and say we're going to revise it. It doesn't float my boat at all.
Thank you, Mr. Mosier. I do have the 2007 version of this policy in front of me. And that paragraph is exactly the same. It has been exactly the same since the policy was initially enacted. I'm just wondering if simply adding outside of the policy committee, comma, the board may not, or because that's kind of the whole purpose of the policy committee. Does that make sense? Or do you think we ought to?
I'm not sure.
Thank you. Should we leave it as is and advance it for the changes to relieve some of the pressure on administrative staff, and then bring it back again another time? Should we table it? Does anyone have feelings about that?
Well, I don't like to take a chance with it, because when you leave something open and kind of vague like that, we do have a faction in the board that would love to get something passed by just being redundant. And I don't know. At this point in time, I'm not happy with the wording of it. I think it's vague because we have no idea what the emergency may be. So I would want to put it off until we get some more input to it.
Okay. Mrs. Fitzpatrick?
I just want to say that this sentence contradicts everything that I've been doing with the policy committee since I've been here. We are constantly revising policies, creating new policies, and bringing them to the full board for adoption and revision. So this line contradicts what this committee does.
And I believe it contradicts the law. Aren't we required by the state to review and potentially revise all of our policies every 4 years? So, Mrs. Porter?
And also, this policy is about agenda preparation and dissemination. So it doesn't really even relate to what the policy is, unless they're, I don't know, like how does that relate to the agenda preparation? So the board can't resolve, I don't know, unless it's on the agenda.
But it doesn't say that.
It doesn't say that, so it doesn't really even fit in with the topic of the policy.
You know, we had situations before where there was something that came through from the state, and I don't remember what it was exactly, but it caused a stir between our policy members and the policy chair. At that time was Mr. Vaughan, and we had to put it off for another meeting because we weren't sure what we had to do. And finally, what we did was we adopted it word for word according to the RSA, and that was the safest way out because you're not, we can't change state law. So we had to adopt it as it was written in state law. So I would suggest, not knowing what exactly to do with this because of the wording, is see what if there is a statute that covers that, and if there is, we can adopt the statute and use that as the guideline.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher. Ms. Porter?
So am I correct in thinking that a change, a revision, or a new policy has to go through the policy committee before it goes to the full board?
Yes.
So maybe this is saying in some unforeseen circumstance that there has to be a change of policy before the next board meeting, that it could go on the agenda. I'm just trying to think of how this relates to what the topic is. So if you're saying, as Mr. Mosher was saying, that something came from the state and you had to change policy right away, and there's not there's a full board meeting, but not a policy committee meeting, in an emergency, you could put it on the agenda. Is that what that means? I'm just trying to figure out how it fits into the...
It's interesting because that's how I initially read it, that, that line would be a change from the regular way of doing business of having policies go through policy and then come. Mr. Guarino, did you have your hand raised?
Yes. Yes, I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Mosher, I came in late to the meeting, but I'm here. I think that we should do. It looks like this line does not belong in this policy because it's about agenda preparation and dissemination. So I think it should be removed. But I also think that we need to revisit the state guidelines for Board of Education and how they create policies, because there are the rules and our policies and the law, and then there is what we do, and those don't meet, as Ms. Fitzpatrick was saying. So we want to try to write policies and have rules that we can conform to as much as possible in real life, because everybody interprets things differently. But this is obviously, we've just been willy-nilly changing policies without emergencies. The way this is written, it basically says that anytime we revise a policy, we have to have an emergency. And as Mr. Mosher mentioned, what's an emergency too? So it leads into all kinds of problems. So I think it just should be stricken, and then we should revisit what the state law says our role is regarding policies and try to write something that conforms as best to that. That would be my opinion.
I agree with you 100%.
Okay. Ms. Porter?
So if there were a policy emergency, couldn't you just call an emergency meeting of the policy committee followed by a full board meeting to take care of it in one fell swoop?
Yes.
That would be good, but you have to define first what is an emergency.
Well, I think for me, I might consider an emergency, for example, the policy that Ms. Hohensee brought to our attention, that we had we had a limited amount of time to get the wording according to the SB 101 in our policy about continuing education and dual enrollment in order to have the monies be available. So for me, if it were, for example, June 15th, and we weren't going to have a meeting in time to pass it by July 1st, then I would personally consider that grounds to have an emergency meeting specifically to do that. So I kind of like the idea of striking it from this policy and simply addressing policies in policy and then having a procedure perhaps of calling emergency meetings when we have to. And we do special meetings all the time.
Right.
Yes, I agree.
And could you,
Take that sentence out, because right now I'm looking at it, and it's like a glaring at me, as if, like Dr. Mosley said, that don't belong there. And until we can get some definitive answer on that, take it out. We can always add it back in later on, if necessary.
Okay, I like that idea. Ms. Porter?
so could we just, for a note to come back to when we try to put this somewhere else, instead of saying an emergency, say a time-sensitive issue, maybe? And if you're going to put it in policy somewhere else, just make a note of it so we remember what we talked about.
I just strike it and then review the other policies, see what defines an emergency.
Okay, I think we are in agreement on that. Just a note, I did look up Ed 303.01, which is substantive duties of school boards. A and B are both saying that it is our responsibility to adopt policies necessary for various things for running of the school district. So we do have the authority, and it's appropriate for us to be adopting policies. So I feel comfortable with the work that we're doing based on that. So on, and there isn't anything in Ed 302.01, which is regarding the superintendent, that would suggest that the responsibility for creating policies is anywhere other than with the school board. So,
Right.
yes. So, all right. So having said that, it looks like the changes that we have agreed to on BEDB are to change 9 a.m. Thursday to 4:30 p.m. Tuesday, preceding the Board of Ed meeting, in paragraph 1. Paragraph 4 is to strike concurrence and replace it with a majority vote of the board. On paragraph 5, to strike the word 2/3, so it's just majority, and to strike the entire sentence that constitutes paragraph 6 regarding revising policies.
Right. That sounds good to me.
Okay, can I have a motion to that effect, please?
So moved.
Oh, Ms. Oden.
I have another concern. Something came up last night where a board member had sent 2 articles and wanted them both copied and sent to the entire board, but we also had the links sent to us. So is there something we could put in this policy that we will send links to articles? Technology has changed a lot of this, so if we could send the links, and should a board member want a written copy, that they could ask for that to be in their packet. I think only one board member request for a written copy of those two articles. So I think that might be something we want to put in there so that we're not wasting time and paper on articles that we can read online.
I don't think it's a good idea to put it into a policy statement.
Okay.
If somebody wants the copies, they can call the office, extension 1003, and get Tara, and she will send out the copies.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'd just like to call our attention to paragraph 7. It says the agenda together with supporting materials shall be distributed to board members at least 3 days prior. It doesn't say anything about printed materials. It just says supporting materials. And so I feel like that supporting materials could be links, which we were provided with. We all got the email copy of the agenda and the papers that went along with it, the PDFs, but also in that email, there were the links, because that's how those of us who read it were able to click on the links and read it. So, I mean, I think the majority of the board was able to review those articles.
Sure.
Thank you.
Those articles are not part of the policy. They do not belong in a policy document.
I would like to second Mr. Mosher's motion, if I could, if it's not too late.
Okay, so Mr. Mosher had made a motion to accept the changes. Ms. Oden, thank you for taking the notes. Would you like me to read the changes again?
Motion to approve the changes in policy VEDB, strike 2/3 in paragraph 5, strike paragraph 6. I didn't take the red ones down. I just wrote the ones that we made tonight.
Okay, in addition to the changes
That were already made.
proposed. Okay, excellent. So housekeeping matter, Mr. Guarino was able to join us at 7:15. So as far as voting, Mrs. Oden had kindly been voting as board president. Would you like to continue, or should we send it over to Mr. Guarino?
I think we should send it over to Reno.
Okay, then let us do that. On the motion, Mr. Guarino,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
okay, and I am also a yes. Okay, apparently I should have put a lot more on our agenda for this evening. The last two items are related to each other. So we have two policies here. Policy 5420, which is rules and regulations for school bus students. It's quite lengthy. And then we have policy 5210, which is also quite lengthy. I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought here. Give me 1 second. Yes. So the information that is on policy 5420, which is rules and regulations for school bus students, I guess they don't really go together after all. 5420 is already included, all of these things are already included in policy JIC, which is regarding student behavior. And JIC is extraordinarily long. I do have it with me. It's the Student Behavioral Standards Policy. And on that policy, it says student behavior standards. Paragraph 2 says these standards are in effect for all Nashua school students at any school function, school-sponsored event, school bus stop, or bus ride. So having read that, this 5420 is redundant. The things in there that are relevant to having appropriate behaviors while you're a student of Nashua are included in JIC. The other small thing I would like to point out is that this is extraordinarily dated. It's from 1986. Some of the things are no longer relevant to students today. My proposal is that we go ahead and rescind 5420, knowing that it is included in our student behavior standards. Mr. Corino.
So this 5420 is verbatim in policy JIC, exactly as it is here?
It is not, because there are many things in here that are not, I'm going to say not modern. However, JIC talks about students' behavioral responsibilities. And the expectations are that the student will be in charge of their own behavior, they will comply with student rules. And then it has a list of all of the violations that students might engage in and what the consequences are. And these violations are in effect both on the school bus, walking to school, and while you're at school or at a game or other school function. And so there is a very long chart of the violations, and they fall into various classes, depending on how severe they are. So I was comparing these things, and a lot of the ones that are relevant to student safety and behavior are included in our class offenses. Most of them, frankly, are a class 3, which is the least significant behavioral offense. So I'm trying to think. If there are any that we feel are particularly important to have for school buses, we can check JIC and see if they're there. I should have put JIC in the packet.
I thought it was going to be added.
Me too. So, for example, some of the offenses listed on JIC are inappropriate behaviors or improper acts, disrupting or distracting others, inappropriate use of electronic devices, including cell phones, failure to follow school rules, pushing or shoving, littering, possession of tobacco, stealing, destroying or altering school property, use of profanity or obscene language, disrespectful behavior, conduct which is emotionally injurious to others, reckless behavior endangering others, harassment, vandalizing or defacing property, which includes school buses, bullying, gambling, threats of violence, fighting, sharing demeaning publications, extorting or maliciously threatening other students in order to gain money or objects, possessing toy guns, firearms, BB guns, anything having to do with illegal drugs, fires, using or threatening to use dangerous objects or weapons, possession of alcohol, any act of sexual violence, possession of dangerous objects including weapons, fireworks, unlawful entry, inciting others to violence or encouraging other students to join a disturbance, or any other violations which the school principal considers reasonable to fall within this category. So that's what we consider our behavioral concerns in JIC. Ms. Porter.
Aren't there in the school bus, I'm trying to remember, on the front of the bus, aren't there rules posted on the wall of the bus, which I would imagine would be the current rules that have been agreed upon for student behavior on a bus? Because I'm looking down here and it's, about opening the windows and putting things in the aisles and those things. I think they're posted in the bus.
Yes, they are. And so for me, my biggest concern about 5420, again, is the redundancy. I don't like having redundant policies. It doesn't make sense to me. But some of the things are not enforceable. We cannot enforce students to, walk in a particular way on their way to the bus stop for the, up to a mile that they're walking to their bus stop. We would like them to do these things, but we can't enforce a consequence because we can't monitor that kind of behavior. And some of these other ones are safety things that, as you said, are on the bus. As far as like leave the bus stop at other stops to which they've been assigned, it's very common, at least for older elementary school age children like mine, for parents to send notes into school. Johnny's going to go over to Bobby's house. Please let him get off one stop. And I certainly don't think that the school bus drivers ought to be responsible for policing our teenagers on which stop they choose to get off on a given day. One would hope that by the time you've reached high school that you have the maturity to get off at the proper stop. And the students who would require a little extra behavioral assistance with that have transportation in their IEP or 504 plan, which would provide that extra assistance. So, Mr. Mosier, you're quiet. Do you have thoughts on this?
Yes, I do. And, I've been following your reading about these here. And, you mentioned redundancy and things like that. But I'm thinking, I have 5 kids that I brought up, and they're not robots. And they're going to do pretty much what they want to do anyway. It's nice to have a set of guidelines for them to follow and to review them once in a while with your children. I think that's the job of the parents to keep after the kids on some of these things. But with the older kids, like you say, you can't expect the bus driver to be the watchdog and policeman on these kids, because a lot of these kids, they are pretty scrappy, and they have no problem telling the bus driver where to get off. I don't mean off the bus.
Sorry.
And a lot of these are a lot bigger and older and stronger than the bus drivers. We have a lot of female bus drivers. And they get on with a bunch of these rowdy teens who are going to do pretty much whatever they want. And I agree, it's good to have a set of rules and have them posted, but I doubt very much that you're going to have a set of rules and regulations like this lined up and posted on the bus, because they not going to read it anyway. Some of them can't read enough to understand what it's all about. But I think that they have to have this, and I think the rules and regulations have to be reviewed every so often. And I think it's important also that the set of rules be posted to the parents so that the parents know what's going on. And if there is a problem with the children, they, by all means, not only the principal but the parents should know about it. And I believe that as a former parent myself, my oldest daughter now is 60 years old, so I think that we have to be willing to take charge of the kids and let them know that, hey, this is what you do and this is what you don't do. And if I have to be notified, then you're going to lose your allowance, you'll lose the car privilege, you won't go out, or you won't do this, or you won't do that. There'll be some sort of retribution for breaking the rules in some flagrant manner. So, yeah, I agree that it's good to have the rules, but at the same time, I doubt they're going to be able to get them to follow them to the T, and I think that they should be looked at, see for redundancy, and if they're going to be effective. And there's nothing like an effective rule. something where if you break the rules, there is something kind of comeback. So that's where I am.
Thank you, Mr. Mosier. To your point regarding effective consequences for misbehavior on the bus, when students do break our behavioral standards under JIC while they are riding the school bus, it is the policy JIC that dictates the consequence that is enacted. So when students are having misbehaviors on the bus driver reports that to the principal, and then the principal takes action to reprimand the student, to enact a consequence, whatever the case may be, based on the bus driver's report to them. So that is happening already under JIC. So, and then, of course, when there are behavioral consequences, parents are notified.
I sure hope that something is done on it, because sometimes you get onto the bus and it's like being in a new world that's uncivilized. So, yes, I hope so.
So, to move forward on this, are we as a committee comfortable with rescinding 5420 and allowing, and we'll just leave JIC because I don't think there's anything that needs to be changed on that one, knowing that it is already incorporated in this other policy? Does anyone want to make a motion to one effect or another?
Well, I think that one should conform to the other. And to emphasize the fact that, you break the rule, that there will be consequences. And leave it at that.
Mr. Guarino?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a motion to rescind 5420.
Okay, I will second it. On the motion, Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Guarino?
Yes.
And I am a yes. And I will, I've made myself a note so that when we have our next main board meeting, I will ensure that JIC and this one are both in that packet so that people can review them for themselves to make sure that everyone's comfortable. So I apologize for that. Okay, and then the last item I have on the agenda is our pupil transportation services policy. And there are just a couple of small changes to this one. Again, it's one that was a numbered policy that we haven't looked at since 2003 that we would like to bring up to our modern standards of having the letters. Mrs. Fitzpatrick.
I just want to let let the committee know that I did take the policy to the transportation director, and he reviewed it to make sure that there weren't other changes that I was unaware of. So it was already reviewed by the transportation director.
Thank you, Mrs. Fitzpatrick. I've noticed on here that we've gotten rid of the word policy. Is there a reason for that? Because I don't have it in my notes. Okay. I'm just going to look at another policy and see what we have in. Do any of the other ones say policy? Having looked at my little book of other policies, none of the other ones say policy. They just have what it is, and then at the top of the page it says Board of Education policy. So that's probably why, to bring it into line. So the other changes of this are to bring language in line with our modern usage. We got rid of department, changed it to district, because that's what we are. We no longer have junior highs and senior highs. And other than that, there were no changes requested by the Transportation Department. Ms. Porter.
I just have a couple of spelling and punctuation things.
Oh, yay.
So in number 4, number 6, and number 7, the word buses is there, and they're spelled 2 different ways. So both spellings are correct, but we should pick one.
On my copy, it looks like someone has crossed off the extra S
Is
on
that what
6.
it is? Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Okay, I wasn't sure what that was. All right, that's good,
So we're going with 1S.
I guess. Okay. Thank you for clarifying. All right, and number 5, students must be ready at the appropriate time to be picked up. There's no hyphen there. There shouldn't be. It's because if it's a pickup stop, it has a hyphen. But if you're being picked up, you don't need a hyphen.
Okay. I'm so glad we have a teacher on the board.
And that's the same thing in 9A. The student is picked up or dropped off. Those hyphens are not necessary,
On either one?
either one.
Okay.
It's not modifying. It's. Thank you.
Any other discussion on this? Mr. Mosier?
Yeah, no, I don't have anything to. No, I have nothing to add to it.
Okay. Then I'm looking for a motion to accept the language changes and change from 5210 to EEA.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Guarino. On the motion, Mr. Guarino,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. And then, as per usual, we need to have a motion to rescind the numbered policy. Just as an aside, I did speak with Tara about this and Mrs. Fitzpatrick, and they went through our old policies. I mean, it looks like we had, what was the word? Revised. It looks like for quite some time we used the word revised on the policy. So instead of saying 5 to 10, it became 5 to 10 revised and then EEA. And then at some point, like 10 years ago, we switched to saying rescinded. So some policies didn't get rescinded, but part of that is revised. It's very odd. So from now on, just to be consistent with the last 10 years' practice, we'd like to change the name and then rescind the old one so that there aren't double policies. Does that make sense to everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Good.
All right. So I'm looking for a motion to rescind 5210.
So moved.
Thank you. I'll second it. Mr. Guarino, how do you vote?
Yes.
Great. Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Wonderful. Did anyone have anything else that they wanted to bring forward this evening?
Yes.
Oh, Mr. Guarino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one issue, and I think it might be for the next policy meeting, and it might come under JIC,
Okay.
and it has to do with bicycles to and from the schools. I don't know if we mentioned bicycles at all. It has to do with transportation. And I think that maybe we could have something that says that students should follow the traffic laws for bicycles and ride their bicycles based on state law or something like that. And when they're on campus, just to conduct safe bicycle use. Just to have that out there that people can use bicycles, because I like to see more bicycle use, but also so that students understand that they have responsibilities when they do ride a bike to be safe and to follow the laws. So just something general, maybe we can, rather than write a whole new policy or anything like that, it might come under JIC since you have transportation under there or something like that.
Okay. I don't see anything as I'm glancing at it in there, but I can do some research and see what we've got. Does anyone else have a thought on that or anything else that they wanted to bring forward?
Yes, I have a thought on it, but I think that's a very good idea to put that out in front. But I think it's also a good idea if we take a look around and see if there are bicycle racks that can be secured to prevent the theft of bicycles, so that we could encourage bicycle use, especially by the middle school and the high school.
Mr. Guarino.
Mr. Mosher, I've been looking at the different schools, and Nashua High South has bicycle racks. They got some very good bicycle parking there. And they do have it at Elm Street. So, and I've also asked the transportation director about that too, and it is something that they're aware of. I haven't looked at all the schools, but I don't know if, I don't think that Sunset Heights, because they just did some reconstruction, they may have put them in, but I have to check. But I have been looking out for that, and I actually haven't looked at Nashua High North, but one of these days I will. But they are looking at that, and they're on the ball. They're on the lookout for that stuff.
Well, very good. It's a wonderful idea, and to encourage the use of bicycles for transportation is good for the health, and to keep our athletes in trim. As the exercise is also good for the mental functioning. So you're on the right track. Let's just make sure we got racks to put the bikes in, and that we can secure them, and then we can encourage the use of the bikes.
Thank you, Mr. Mosier. Just looking down the pike at the next couple of meetings, since we have been super efficient tonight, I would like to continue what we're doing with looking at our numbered policies and bringing them up to date so that we are doing our very best to comply with our expectation from the state that we look at all of our policies every 4 years. A couple of things that have been proposed to come before the policy committee would be a student cell phone use policy. I believe we do have things under policy JIC regarding cell phones being used in a non-distracting and appropriate way. I'm happy to bring JIC forward to kind of compare it. Except that we just looked at JIC in February of 2017. So I'm concerned about spending time on something that we've looked at so recently when we have so many old things. I also have a request for some policy updates regarding the Human Resources Committee, but I have a note that it went to the HR Committee for review, so I'm going to leave that alone. There's a proposal regarding creating a new board member orientation process, which we might want to talk about. There's a proposal regarding creating an annual meeting. There's a proposal regarding professional ethics for our teachers and making some changes in regards to ID cards. So those are the items that are upcoming that I will try and intersperse with our things that we are required to do by the government. So if anyone else has anything that they would like to propose for review, please go ahead and email me or bring it up at a regular board meeting and they can shunt it down. But all of these are things that have been emailed directly to me and I'm comfortable with that.
It sounds like something good to pursue and to take them and compare them to what we have and what we would like to have, and maybe with some amendments we can just assign them new letters and the old numbers.
Awesome.
And kind of breeze through it, and, just to check with see if there's been any changes in the RSAs that may affect it. So it's a good thing to do.
Okay, wonderful. So with that, I think we have flown through this evening, and so I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, on the motion, Mr. Guarino.
Yes.
Mr. Mosier.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. We are adjourned at 6:56 p.m. Thank you.